For those who serve aboard this carrier, a defining motto captures the very essence of the United States Navy. The creed remains direct: give them hell, and that is precisely what they deliver. At precisely 4:19 a.m., on November 21, 2025, over the Caribbean Sea airspace, three Venezuelan Su-30 MK2 fighter jets executed a sudden dive from 2,000 feet altitude. The aircraft accelerated beyond 480 knots, rapidly closing on the USS George Washington, executing a maneuver unprecedented in this theater of operations. Within under 20 seconds, the vessel's combat systems engaged interception protocols, responding to the emerging strategic threat. Critically, with fewer than 4 nautical miles between them and the carrier strike group, the Su-30s sustained their velocity and attack vector, driving the situation to a critical threshold, where one command could trigger open hostilities. Their objective to compel the U.S. to alter its trajectory, thereby establishing a dangerous political precedent in the region. Could American interception systems neutralize this emerging threat, or would Caribbean conflict erupt imminently? Here is the tactical account. At 0400 hours on November 21, 2025, across the Caribbean Sea airspace, three Venezuelan Su-30 fighters maintained tight V formation, their afterburners etching luminous trails across the darkness as they exceeded Mach 1 velocity. Rather than shadowing the American fleet from altitude, they executed a sharp descent targeting the projected flight corridor of the U.S. carrier strike group directly, flying with the precision of crews who had rehearsed this approach numerous times. Each wing adjustment brought them nearer to the invisible airway the USS George Washington would traverse naturally. They positioned themselves in the path of the U.S. group, appearing partially as a probe, partially as a warning, and partially as a tactical snare. On the 3D radar display within the Combat Information Center, 3 targets illuminated yellow, marking potential hostile interceptors. Within 20 seconds, the system compiled additional data: altitude 2,000 feet, velocity exceeding 480 knots, bearing direct intercept trajectory. Pilots scrambled into position. Flight deck personnel achieved full readiness. Even though a carrier strike group is engineered to endure extreme pressure, aerial interception within a 12 nautical mile perimeter is never classified as routine. At that range, high-speed aircraft afford virtually no reaction time. A massive warship like a carrier cannot turn its rudder quickly, cannot break formation, and a carrier strike group cannot adjust its flight corridor merely because another nation attempts intimidation. This explains the rapid escalation in tension. The Venezuelan Su-30s were vectoring toward the carrier's path using a cut-angle approach, a method NATO classifies as attack geometry configuration. Immediately, a Level 3 alert activated across the vessel. Red lights pulsed through the steel corridors of the USS George Washington. On the flight deck, sailors commenced securing equipment, fastening helmets prepared for any directive. A massive carrier group cannot maneuver rapidly. Even minor course corrections require kilometers of sea room. Those 3 agile fighters understood this. They were exploiting the carrier's maneuverability limitations, knowing it cannot evade during these initial minutes. The situation was not about missiles, radar, or ordnance. It was about vectors, velocity, and determination. Venezuela had chosen to act first, and they engaged with maximum assertion, employing military aviation to compel a U.S. carrier to change heading. In standard aerial intercepts, pilots only need to maintain safe altitude, fly parallel to the opposing formation, and maintain consistent speed to prevent misunderstandings. However, the 3 Venezuelan Su-30 MK2s were executing entirely different tactics. They were not at altitude. They were not maintaining distance from the carrier's turbulence zone. And most critically, they were deliberately positioning themselves in a tactical cutoff geometry any air combat specialist would identify. Within the first 3 seconds, from the USS George Washington's command bridge, officers observed the pattern clearly. With each Su-30 angle adjustment, they compressed the interception trajectory, constricting the U.S. fleet's air corridor, as though constructing an invisible barrier of steel overhead. At 15 nautical miles, experienced pilots would typically break formation, but these 3 flankers maintained position. They preserved their V-shape banked slightly right, and simultaneously descended to 700 feet, establishing a direct cut-off trajectory into the projected launch path of American aircraft. Should the carrier initiate jet operations within minutes? No one assessed this as surveillance. No one considered it a patrol. No one believed this was a technical error. The intent was clear. Venezuela was attempting to force the U.S. to change course, a maneuver with significant political implications. Because if the U.S. carrier deviated even 1 to 2 degrees from its intended track, Venezuela could assert that this airspace was their security zone. The U.S. yielded under pressure, and Caracas possessed authority to manage airspace around waters, they claimed. In maritime diplomacy, a 1-degree course correction equates to a strategic concession. Venezuela was executing precisely that strategy, compelling a superpower through velocity and positioning, not through armament. Within the USS Gravely's Combat Information Center, the analysis officer delivered a brief, decisive assessment. They are forming attack geometry. Not because they intended to engage, but because they wanted the U.S. to believe they could engage, at any moment pressuring Washington into adjusting its flight path. However, they miscalculated one factor. A U.S. aircraft carrier never changes course for any adversary. The distance between the three Su-30 MK2s and the carrier strike group had now diminished below 10 nautical miles, a boundary every U.S. officer designates as a maximum tactical risk zone. In aerial combat, 10 nautical miles represents merely seconds of flight time. In fleet doctrine, a nautical miles marks where an adversary can establish position if the U.S. fails to act first. And the U.S. did act with a composure that was nearly chilling. USS Gravely increased turbine output and adjusted course from its escort position. Off the carrier's starboard quarter, USS Gravely DDG-107 began accelerating turbines straining like tension steel. The destroyer banked slightly to starboard, then executed a wide yet precisely calculated arc turn, deviating only a few degrees, yet sufficient to position directly into the projected cutoff line of the three Su-30s, not advancing aggressively, not blocking head-on, but claiming tactical position. In combined air-sea confrontations, position equals authority. Every aviator knows the unwritten doctrine. Whoever claims the angle first controls the engagement. Gravely executed precisely that smooth, deliberate without a single wasted action. The MH-60R Seahawk powered up, the first U.S. signal projected into the airspace. As soon as Gravely initiated its course adjustment, the MH-60R Seahawk received orders to prepare for launch. Within under 30 seconds, the naval helicopter, equipped with the APS-153 multimode radar system, departed the deck, its rotor slicing through the early morning maritime air, then orbiting above Gravely like a vigilant shadow. In modern warfare, a Seahawk is not merely a helicopter. It is the fleet's elevated surveillance platform, a multi-spectrum target identification system, the initial layer of soft deterrence and a message. We observe you, we are recording. Do not attempt it. Naval Air Systems Command has declared this openly in official reports. Visibility constitutes deterrence. Clear presence is deterrence. This was precisely the U.S. strategy. Holding position, refusing to yield, demonstrating to Venezuela they could not impose position. The U.S. had entered positional dominance mode. As the Su-30s continued advancing like three steel-tipped lances, Gravely's position, combined with the Seahawk's orbital pattern, formed a soft encirclement. No attacks, no target locks, yet it redirected pressure back onto the three flankers. From that moment, the engagement was no longer about velocity. It had evolved into a contest for position, for initiative, for airspace authority. As the three Su-30 MK2s continued descending to 4,300 feet and reduced velocity from Mach 1.2 to Mach 0.92, one fact became unmistakably evident to every officer aboard USS Gravely. Venezuela was penetrating deep into what Americans call the tactical clarity zone, the zone where every movement, no matter how subtle, reveals true intent. Yet it was within this zone that the U.S. Navy began responding, with a distinctive language, the language of steel and sensors. No verbal communication, no target locks, simply allowing the adversary to observe. On the bow of USS Gravely, the 5-inch Mark 45 Mod 4 naval gun, normally aimed forward, began rotating slightly northwest, directly toward the trajectory of the descending Su-30s. It did not lock, it did not engage, it did not activate its fire control radar. Yet the subtle rotation alone sufficed to capture every Venezuelan pilot's attention. In naval operations, the orientation of a gun barrel is its own language. When the 5-inch begins pointing at you, it communicates we observe you and we are shifting into readiness. Silent warning, but precisely calibrated. Toward the aft deck, the Phalanx CIWS system with its ultra-sensitive K-band radar quietly rotated its white turret, its electronic eye facing the Su-30's approach vector. It did not emit a strong active radar pulse, did not illuminate the aircraft, did not execute anything that could be classified as hostile. Yet, the reality was this: it had begun tracking every pixel of movement. A CIWS, in passive track mode, prevents Venezuela from accusing the U.S. of escalation, yet compels the pilots to reconsider every bank angle, every throttle input, every vector deviation, because any of it could be interpreted as attack preparation. Atop the superstructure, the SPY-1 radar of the Aegis system continued, operating at reduced output, not illuminating the Su-30s, not generating a cockpit warning tone, not appearing as provocation. This is where the U.S. excels. Sufficient awareness to know everything, yet insufficient to be accused of escalation. Officers designate this posture eyes open, weapons sheathed. Eyes open, but the blade still in the scabbard. In the sky above, the MH-60R Seahawk tightened its large orbit around, gravely forming a visible close-range air shield these Su-30s could not disregard. The rotor churned the morning maritime air, the helicopter banking slightly maintaining calculated separation, 3,000 to 3,500 feet below the flanker's flight path. Tactically, the Seahawk served as a reminder: one erroneous move from you, and the entire Aegis suite will fully engage its sensors. As the three Su-30 MK2s descended to 3,800 feet, everything transitioned into a level where nothing could be misread. This was no longer a tactical encounter. It was a test of will that could escalate at any moment. At approximately Mach 0.9 with their attack vector unchanged, like a blade slicing directly into the carrier's air corridor, they had pressed the U.S. to a point where every decision became a test of national competence for both sides. On the SPY-1 radar display, the three Su-30s appeared as three luminous spears. Vectors steady the thrust of their AL-31F engines carving the sky. Officers aboard USS Gravely reported continuously bogies, maintaining angle speed unchanged. Descent continues. That was the moment. The American strike group entered what analysts call the gray 4 nautical mile envelope, the 4M gray zone. Any military aircraft entering this distance at high velocity risks triggering an aerial collision, an identification failure, or an automatic defensive response from the U.S. In modern history, several serious incidents have occurred under these exact conditions, and the Su-30 pilots understood that precisely. From the carrier's bridge, time appeared to slow. The internal announcement system blared a warning: air contact closing high-speed vector. Brace for potential intercept. Officers raised their binoculars, recording every detail: wing bank angle, aerodynamic vibration, the shimmering exhaust plume from the Su-30 engines. Deck crews secured safety harnesses. Every battle station was fully manned. From the U.S. Navy's perspective, this was the standard moment for foreign aircraft to decelerate, widen formation, or respond via radio. But the three Su-30s executed none of that. They maintained their spearhead formation, sustained their high velocity, and continued descending as if attempting to force the U.S. to act first. At that moment, the Seahawk above adjusted its observation angle, its electro-optical and infrared cameras capturing every second. SPY-1 transitioned into detailed vector analysis mode. The CIWs entered passive-active readiness, capable of engaging within a single command. And there was a cold truth the Venezuelan pilots may not have considered. At 4 nautical miles, an approaching aircraft is only 12 to 15 seconds away from triggering a mandatory U.S. hard response, and the clock was counting down with every heartbeat. The distance between the three Su-30 MK2s and the airspace controlled by the carrier strike group was now merely 3.9 nautical miles. This was no longer a distance for observation or tactical monitoring. At 3,500 to 3,800 feet and nearly Mach 0.9, a single erroneous input, an unexpected burst of aerodynamic vibration, or a mistaken cockpit command could trigger an unintended collision, and with it an immediate diplomatic crisis. At that moment, the United States Navy decided to issue an official warning, not through force, but through the formal language of international aviation law. From USS Gravely, a transmission broadcast on an open frequency. Unidentified Venezuelan aircraft. This is United States Navy warship operating in international airspace. Maintain safe separation immediately. The phrasing was precisely crafted. Not threatening, not provocative, but absolutely firm. The volume was measured, the tone icy. Every commercial vessel in the area heard it. Every coastal radar station logged it. This was not merely a warning. It was a public declaration of position, affirming that the U.S. was operating in international airspace and that Venezuela possessed no authority to coerce. No reply, no formation change, no altitude adjustment, only silence from them, the kind of silence veteran pilots understand precisely. Dialogue means acknowledging U.S. legal correctness. Silence is a weapon. Silence is a statement. Silence is Venezuela, signaling they were willing to continue pressing the angle. Then something occurred that the entire crew on Gravely observed. Su-30 No. 1 activated a signal flag light on its left wing, a rare gesture in military protocol. Under the rising sun, the illuminated flag symbol was unmistakable, asserting a defense identification zone. Venezuela's symbolic method of claiming authority to demand foreign aircraft alter course. They did not transmit it over radio. They did not provoke directly. They employed exactly what makes confrontations like this asymmetric, symbolic language. This tactic is often used to avoid being recorded, avoid creating political evidence, yet still transmit a challenge. USS George Washington continued directly along its designated corridor. The Su-30s maintained their cutting vector. The sky descended into a silence stretched tight as a drawn bowstring, a contest of wills in which no shots had been fired. Yet the weight of this moment was no less heavy than live ammunition. In high-risk aerial confrontations, the smallest detail can reverse the entire trajectory of events. At the exact moment the three Su-30 Su-30 MK2s were only 3.7 nautical miles from the extended defensive perimeter of USS George Washington. The radar aboard USS Gravely detected the first significant change. The signal appeared clearly on the AM tell. 1D display. Speed drop detected Su-30 flight, reducing from Mach 0.90 to Mach 0.78, a number that might appear ordinary, but in the language of air combat, it is the first step of active de-escalation. Pilots never reduce velocity in a crossing zone unless they intend to maintain a safer separation, or they intend to transition from an aggressive, cut-off posture to passive observation. With the Su-30 MK2, a heavy thrust-dominant fighter, this was even more significant. Holding Mach 0.9 gave them full initiative in any close approach maneuver. But when they dropped to Mach 0.78, the US immediately understood. The Venezuelan pilots were reassessing the risk, and they had realized one factor. The US carrier was not changing course, not reducing velocity, not conceding anything. The MH-60R Seahawk's EO air camera captured it up close. The noses of aircraft number 2 and number 3 began drifting, slightly off the original cutoff line. Not much, not dramatically. Just a few degrees. But for any tactical officer, it was the equivalent of a long exhale after minutes of held breath. The CIC officer aboard gravely remarked, "Formation softening, they are reassessing." Within 20 seconds, the Su-30 vector line no longer pressed against the projected US flight path, but shifted slightly leftward. Thermal signatures from the AL-31F engines indicated they had decreased afterburner output, transitioning into a more fuel-efficient flight mode. All of this combined into a clear picture. Venezuela was backing off, but did not want to appear as though they were backing off. In US Navy tactical training manuals, there is a term blink point, the moment when both sides are challenging each other, and one side finally must blink first to avoid disaster. Here, the side that blinked was Venezuela. No radio call, no warning, no official message, just a reduction in velocity, a loosening of formation, and a shifted vector. But that was all the confirmation the US required. The other side had begun to de-escalate. As the Su-30 MK2 formation reduced velocity from Mach 0.78 to Mach 0.72, the entire space around the carrier strike group seemed to shift in tone. The pressure eased by 1 degree, yet the tension remained fully intact, like a steel cable still pulled tight, only no longer vibrating. Then within less than 15 seconds, US Gravely's radar detected the next shift, the shift every analyst recognizes, as the opponent is beginning to exit the engagement. The MH-60R Seahawk's camera captured it clearly. The lead Su-30 gently banked left by roughly 8 degrees, pulling the 2 trailing aircraft with it. This was not a hard break, not an evasive maneuver, and certainly not a sudden afterburner burst to escape the area. It was a deliberate, calculated course change designed to avoid conceding defeat, avoid appearing like a retreat, yet still move away from the US flight corridor. The Americans have a phrase that describes this with precise accuracy: controlled disengagement. From Gravely's deck, the tactical officer confirmed lead Su-30 shifting vector formation, bending southeast. The most striking aspect of the encounter was not that Venezuela began to de-escalate. It was that the US did not alter a single parameter. USS George Washington continued at 20 knots on the exact heading, in the exact slipstream corridor, as though no Su-30 had ever dived toward them. No confrontation had ever occurred. No nation had attempted to force them to yield airspace control. This is the art of superpower composure, not winning by explosions, but winning by not moving. From above, the flight path of the 3 flankers formed a softening arc, initially cutting across the US route, then curving gently east-southeast and finally running parallel, but far enough away to pose no threat. At Mach 0.7, the Su-30s left long, pale contrails soft, stretched, and entirely unlike the aggression of earlier. A subtle shift, but impossible to conceal from US radar. There was no dive, no gunfire, no dramatic cinematic moment. Only a strategic truth: Venezuela changed course. Venezuela reduced velocity. Venezuela opened formation. Venezuela abandoned the cutoff vector. And the US did not move a single millimeter. That is why analysts call this type of victory dominance without violence, control achieved without firing a shot. As the 3 Su-30 MK2s began sliding east-southeast, the curved traces on the SPY-1 radar gradually widened. Their velocity continued to fall, Mach 0.65, then Mach 0.58, a threshold that signaled they had fully abandoned any intent to pressure, cut off, or test reactions. At 4 through 500 feet, the formation that once appeared sharp as a blade now appeared loose, like a hand slowly releasing. The Seahawk's FLIR camera captured aircraft number 1, gently climbing to 6,000 feet, then banking a few more degrees to the right, distancing itself from the turbulent airflow generated by the carrier strike group. The other 2 followed, but each chose a slightly different separation angle, marking the complete dissolution of the V-shaped tactical formation. The radar controller aboard gravely reported, Venezuelan flight exiting intercept vector. No re-engagement signs. This report confirmed more than a technical change. It confirmed a strategic defeat. While the Su-30 MK2s disengaged, the Seahawk continued circling above, gravely maintaining textbook surveillance distance. Its cameras recorded every second until the three flankers shrank into faint glowing specks, fading along the horizon. Everything was documented, an irrefutable record that the U.S. never changed course, never reduced velocity, never ceded its lawful flight path, and that Venezuela was the side that chose to leave first. No missiles fired, no systems forced into hard lock, no U.S. fighters launched from the deck. Yet the outcome was clearer than any armed engagement. Whoever maintains their course wins. Whoever withdraws first loses. And in this confrontation, the answer was indisputable. As the final contrails of the three Su-30 MK2 flankers faded along the edge of the horizon, the Caribbean Sea returned to its natural calm. Yet for anyone who witnessed the encounter, whether from the deck, the radar room, or the MH-60R Seahawk overhead, this calm was not accidental. It was the result of a contest of will, where only one side held its line until the very end. And that side was the United States Navy. The three Su-30's approach descended, maintained attack velocity, and deliberately carved a sharp intercept line designed to force the U.S. to change course. They employed psychological tactics, symbolism, and even silence to apply pressure. Yet instead of responding with weapons or escalation, the U.S. responded with the composure forged through decades of command over the oceans. The U.S. gravely maneuvered like a cold blade, claiming tactical position. Without a single aggressive gesture, the MH-60R Seahawk launched not to challenge, but to observe every detail. U.S. weapon systems rotated, angled, and awakened without ever drawing a sword. And most importantly, USS George Washington did not deviate by even 1 degree from its international flight path. At the strategic level, that meant more than any fighter scramble ever could. Analysts call this a form of victory known as deterrence posture. Deterrence through stance. It rests on 3 pillars: absolute discipline in course and velocity. The fleet does not alter parameters even under provocation. The ability to control surrounding space without firing, using only position sensors, and consistent presence. Superpower psychology, neither overreacting nor conceding. The U.S. holds initiative through composure alone. Venezuela tried to pressure. Venezuela tried to test. But they were the ones who had to loosen formation, slow down, change course, and leave while the U.S. continued forward, as if the episode were nothing more than a breeze passing across the bow. If you were standing on the bridge of USS George Washington at 0400 hours that morning, watching 3 Su-30 MK2s dive straight down from the sky, the distance closing every second, radio silence, the opposing formation sharpening its angle again and again, would you have held the exact same course as the United States Navy did? Or would you have turned, even by a single degree,